voilà, présentation du livre La baleine tatouée de Witi Ihimaera, en compagnie donc de notre modérateur Marao. Donc je vais vous laisser la parole et voilà, ça y est.
Bonjour à tous. Je vais laisser Witi commencer.
Inga iwi, inga reo, inga mana, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou ki a koe, te wahine atahua. I can't tell you how much of an honor it is to be in the presence of Flora Devatine. Flora, with Dewe, with many of our contemporaries, is one of the greatest Polynesian writers at any particular time. And I have written in her book that when we read her work, we are in the presence of greatness. And I mean that from a language point of view. And so Flora and I would really welcome the younger writers, because they too are endeavoring to do the very best with the language. Becky, Manawatu, Christiana, a new generation to whom we can continue to hope that they are able to maintain the careers, to establish a greater sense of the problems and the passion of being a Polynesian. And I want to say to Becky in particular that you don't have to tell people that you are Māori, that Māori people claim you as well. So it is that claiming of both Flora and I that also validates us. And there is a particular genealogy of Māori literature that Becky comes from, not only through Alan Duff, but also through Kerry Hume. So one of the great issues, and you will see that in Flora's writing, as well as in Christiana's and also in Becky's, is that it isn't actually the written text that is important, it's the unwritten text. It's not the text that you read, it's the text that is underneath the read text. It is the unseen text, not just the seen text. And so therefore, I congratulate the younger generation for continuing to work in metaphor, which is, of course, what we all endeavour to do as artists. Nā reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Merci Witi, c'est très juste ce que tu dis. Le travail de Becky est vraiment majestueux. Toi, tu parles d'auteurs qui sont importants dans le Pacifique, et toi, ça fait 50 ans que tu es publié cette année. Donc toi-même, tu as un parcours remarquable. C'est un euphémisme.
So I had a father who was a farmer, and my father used to say, we used to go out and dig fence posts on the farm to string the fences on. And when I started to write, he said to me, well son, writing beats digging in fence posts. But I always have felt ever since that what I am doing is working as an artisan rather than as an artist. And that therefore I look at all of my work as just digging in fence posts.
Donc on va présenter ton ouvrage La baleine tatouée, The Whale Rider. Dans quel contexte est-ce que tu l'as écrit?
When I was a young boy, I used to walk or ride to Whangara, and that meant a 3-hour bike ride, or else just about the whole afternoon and whole night getting to Whangara, because I was always fascinated by paikea, the carving on top of the meeting house. So I always was asking myself, where did paikea come from? Why is he so important here in New Zealand? And the reason for that is that he brought the culture of Raiatea to Aotearoa. So from that moment on, and I was around about 9, my father used to have to find out where I was because I would never tell him. But he always used to ring up Moni Taumonu, who was my elder at Whangara, and Moni would say to him, "Oh no, don't worry, Tom, Witi is here in Whangara, and he will stay with us." So what I used to do, and I'm sure this happened with Flora, was that Moni and his wife, they would sleep with me as a young boy of, say, between 8 until I was 12, because I used to visit quite often in those 4 years. I would sleep in the middle, and they would go like, "Ui a mai koe a whakahua te ake ko ai te whare nei e," or they would do karakia or other things. So from a very early age, I heard their voices, and when I started to write, it was really just trying to replicate the rhythms, the intonations, the linguistics, the metaphor, the irony, the various ways in which they spoke. Because Māori is an oral literature. So as long as I try to get that oral and sense of telling stories into my work.
Yesterday we were with pupils, and you told them that the song of the whales is similar to Maori language, Maori singing. The Maori culture is important in your work. It's the core element of it, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
The Maori culture is at the center of your work.
Yes. So it has always been at the center of my work, and my father was the one who really was the architect of my life and of my career. And in terms of my life, he used to say to me, well, there is Te Ao Pākehā, or the white world, and then there is Te Ao Māori, the Māori world. But, in fact, that's entirely wrong. The whole world is Te Ao Māori. So, with this world too, this entire world is Te Ao Māori. So, because he thought like that, I never found it difficult to write in English, because I kept on thinking, really, my world is a Māori world, and the fact that I write in English is beside the point.
Quelle partie de l'histoire de Paikea fait écho à ta réalité?
So, with the patriarch, with the whale rider, with the matriarch, with woman far walking, with sky dancer, with most of my work, it has really always been about grandmothers and about having been brought up in a more female-oriented world. So the whale in the Whale Rider represents the mystery, of course, of the universe and of the environment. It represents also the patriarchal conditioning that I had to escape. So when Pai, or Kahu, rides the whale, what she's really doing is she is affirming the possibility of young women to escape patriarchy and to establish for herself a role as a successor, and a valid successor in a tribe which was and still is patriarchal. And that is because I was the eldest son of an 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 eldest son, going all the way back to the beginning of time. But I had one daughter, and my grandfather said, well, try again, and the next time you try, you'll have a boy. but that was not possible. So most of my work, and don't forget that I was writing from 1972 to the year 2000, I'm talking about here, at a time when women weren't affirmed as much as they are now. And at a time when there were really only 3 or 4 Maori writers. So we were a very isolated fraternity, much as you were here in French Polynesia. In the film, for instance, it was almost impossible to create the conditions for the film to be made in New Zealand in 1989, which is when the book was published. It took 12 years for the film to be made. It was made for $2 million, New Zealand, which is not very much money. The only possible way in which that movie was made was when the Prime Minister of New Zealand felt that it was going to be an important story, and so she put another $3 million into the movie. So I like to tell people that The Whale Rider was made for what would be in Hollywood the price of breakfast.
How today you worked towards your children as well, as you're saying. So today, how are they feeling about this movie, for example, this book, for example?
So the book is one particular product, and if you read the book, then you will discover that the movie is quite different. So as a Māori, when you are within other industries that are owned by Hollywood, for instance, then you are often required to make decisions that you don't really want to make. Like one of the very, very first options that we had for The Whale Rider was from a film studio that specialized in animation. So they asked if they could have the option to make this movie as an animation, and they explained that they would have singing whales and they would have fish that would be, you know, doing haka in the sea. Well, we absolutely said no. I wish we had said yes, because Moana became a great success. Another option that we had was from a film company that were going to throw millions of dollars at us. And what they said was that they wanted to have a movie, they wanted to have Harrison Ford in the movie, and he would be an American who comes to New Zealand with his daughter, an American girl, and they would get to know a Māori tribe that had this whale rider legend. So John, my producer, rang me up and said, "So what do you think about a movie with Harrison Ford as an American who comes and an American girl who rides the whale?" And we then had to walk away from around about a movie that could have been $53 million and continue to have the integrity and the authenticity to write a story which had all of my aunties and uncles in it. We decided to make it on location rather than in a set, because that would give it an absolute sense of place, that nothing that you saw was artificial. So when I went home to Whangarā and asked if that was possible, they then made a number of prohibitions about the filming. My aunties then, on the first day of the shoot, when I saw them, I couldn't recognize them because they'd gone down to the beauty parlor and had their hair curled. And all of the houses, all of a sudden, had sprouted roses and hollyhocks, and they'd been repainted and whatever. So making the movie was very interesting because they also had the assumption that we would be making a movie that looked like Hollywood. So because we as artists have got to maintain our own integrity, I went around to Nani Moni and my uncles and said, just go back to the way that you were. This is not a movie that we want glamorized. This is a movie of you, of real people. And some of those aunties, you know, I had to go up to their hair with water and pat it down and take their lipstick off. So it was very important for us to represent our culture in a way that it was, which is why I admire the writers here in Tahiti, because what they are attempting to do is to represent this culture in this way without glamorizing it, but enabling people to see the intelligence. When you read Flora's work, you will find the intelligence, the motivating analysis of language, the understanding of the reo, not only in French, but also the various debates that we continue to have about being purveyors of a minority language within a majority world.
Donc tout à l'heure, on va pouvoir visionner Paikea. Je suppose que le film Paikea t'a inspiré à t'orienter vers le cinéma. Aujourd'hui, tu es vraiment impliqué dans le cinéma?
Yes, so I felt that it was important because most cinema industries are created by and funded by and produced by Pākehā infrastructures. And so I then decided that what I would do was to become co-producer. And that way I could maintain the control of what we call kawa, or the process, and also tikanga, or the way in which the movie was made, its methodology, so that that would really have a role. I have to say that one of the things that we did not succeed was to have a Māori director. And it was an issue that we had attempted to resolve. The director of the film came to me and she said, I may not be Māori, but I am learning the reo, and I may not have all of the qualities that you want, but I am a woman, and I can bring a woman's perspective to this industry, which is only really ruled by male directors. And even today, there are very few female directors who win awards, and she is one of them. The actors in it were not trained. They were not trained actors. The actress who played Pai in the movie was someone who auditioned for the role, and yet she ended up walking the red carpet, being the youngest nominee for the Best Actress Award. So it was like a fairy story, and for many young Māori girls, she showed that your race, your ethnicity, your colour should not matter if you want to succeed in the world. So she became Moby Chick.
Est-ce que tu travailles sur des projets cinématographiques en ce moment?
So I'm an old dog who likes to learn new tricks. And I think that I keep on being young because I'm always constantly learning. So I have two feature films coming up, and in these feature films I am the executive producer. I have learnt enough about film funding and film financing, for instance, to be able to go to Germany and to be able to support my film by explaining why it is important. And so when we were talking earlier, or when the previous panel was talking about being on the 2-month residency, I had a question, and that question was, are we also teaching writers and all artists about the business of being a writer, about the industry? For instance, Estelle knows so much about the publishing industry, and not many writers know what I now know about how to read contracts, for instance. So when I first began to read the Whale Rider contract, I didn't know what I was doing, but I would get my pen out and I would put a question mark only. And the question mark would be on the participation fee for the local people. And then when the lawyers would look at the contract and see all of these question marks, then they would say, oh, we must be doing something wrong. And then they would increase the subvention, or they would look at, in other words, Flora and I, and everybody else who's a writer here, offers new eyes to look at traditional ways, primarily majority ways of doing things. So in my life now, what I am trying to do is to say to you, writing is easy. It's to say to other people, if you haven't got the money to negotiate through one publishing house, then try to create a combination of publishing houses. And in the case of my films, I am no longer content to make films for $3 million. One of them will possibly have a budget of $20 million. But that is because I have now learnt how to negotiate all of those particular industries. So for me, it's not just being a writer that's important, it's the business of being a writer. And that's why, I'm not boasting here, I'm not at all. That's why I am so successful. I know the biz, I can do the biz. Put me in front of people, put me in front of any room full of bureaucrats. Give me an appointment with a banker, and I will go prepared and say, this is my balance sheet, this is the profit sheet if that's possible, this is the production schedule, this is when we will be publishing or when we are making this film. So I would like to ask you for $2 million. So all of you must get involved in the business. Don't be content to just let your publisher do it for you. With Estelle, of course, you have a publisher who loves us and who loves Polynesia and who understands the difficulties. But most publishers don't. Christiane is another.
Est-ce qu'on a encore du temps?
T'as encore du temps, c'est juste que... Est-ce qu'il y a potentiellement des questions? C'est juste pour ça.
Oui.
Et s'il n'y a pas de questions, tu peux continuer. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans le public?
Yorana, thank you. What if we don't get along with business? What if we have a, how do you say that? We don't deal with business. We just want to be artists and we just want to write for our ancestor. And because the money is something like maybe if we consider it like outside of our soul, how are we gonna, what is your advice for us?
When I first started to write, I thought to myself, what's the use of doing all of this work if it's not published. So everything that I write to have published. Everything I try to spin my work so that it increases its value in film, in theatre, and is engaging enough for people to be able to say, yes, we want to do this. You have to represent your work, is my quick answer to your question, to the best of your ability. And that actually means not just writing it, but standing behind it, and also standing in front of it, and representing it as a financially viable piece of work, as well as a culturally viable piece of work.
Est-ce qu'il y a encore une question dans le public? Non? Bah, t'as encore quelques minutes.
Okay. But last thing, the most important thing, of course, is to have faith. Is to have faith in ourselves to be able to deliver work. And if we don't have that faith, if we don't have a sense of who we are, then our work won't have the mana and the ihi to stand. All it is about is making our work stand. Ka pine a koe au ki te pine o te aroha ki te pine e kore nei wai kura e nā reira ka nui te mihi ki a koutou.
Merci.
Merci Witi. C'était un plaisir et un honneur d'être là avec toi aujourd'hui. Et il me semble que donc on va pouvoir visionner le film Paikea dans la salle Muriavai.
C'est ça, c'est à la salle Muriavei, avec en plus, je crois, une dédicace aussi de Witi devant l'entrée du film. Donc voilà, c'est à la salle Muriavei. N'hésitez pas à vous y rendre. Merci à tous d'avoir été là. C'était la dernière présentation de la journée, donc c'était sur la baleine tatouée de Witi Ihimaera avec donc Maro qui était là pour modérer. Merci aussi à toi.
Merci à toi.
Et donc voilà, c'était la dernière intervention de la journée. On vous donne rendez-vous encore une fois demain pour continuer d'échanger avec les merveilleux invités et auteurs qui étaient là. N'oubliez pas la baleine tatouée disponible au stand au Vent des Îles qui a été réédité.